So now we have some special guests. I'm just going to go ahead and bring them on the show. Chrissy, if you will join, we will be joining with Alex Weiser and Ben Kaplan, and they're the composing duo and lyricist for our show that we produced this past year as a LABA second stage, The State of the Jews. So hi, Alex. Hi, Ben.
Hey.
Hi, David.
Great to
It's
be
good
here.
to see your faces.
Likewise. It's weird to
Same.
not be at the 14th Street Y, but I'll take what I can get.
You know, we're just so excited that we have the opportunity to share the work that you created that was so special and beautiful and played to sold out houses this past December and was just part of what was, until March, the best season we'd ever had with the best ticket sales and just honestly some of the most beautiful art. I mean, it was so sold out in the theater that I had to ask you to help be ushers because crowd control was wild, and we needed more staff than we already had. So thank you for doing that, and I'd love to just ask you about what some of your experiences were in developing the piece, and who all of the wonderful people who helped you bring this to life, and what's the journey been for State of the Jews.
Yeah, so thank you so much. It's great to be here. It was an amazing pleasure to show this piece at the 14th Street Y. And it's something that Ben and I have been working on for quite some time now. We started it when I was a composer fellow with American Opera Projects, and we wrote a few arias through that, and we met some of the wonderful singers that we then continued to work with in this project. And then I just kind of chipped away at it while I was a LABA fellow. And we were really pleased we showed, I think, 20 minutes of it or so as a part of the LABA fellowship. And then we brought the whole thing to the 14th Street Y for a second stage. And it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, of course, we worked on it, as Alice was saying, for a number of years, actually. We kind of chipped away at it over time. And, there's the thing you're doing when you're writing alone in, at home. But then when you get to take it into a workshop at a place like the 14th Street Y and bring all these other artists together. And for me, working on the words, to hear the music Alex wrote with the instrumentalists and the singers, every time, it never ceases to be so exciting when you get into that first rehearsal and that first workshop and you get to hear the music come to life.
Also, I was really impressed by the staging. And I would love to hear a little bit about the director who worked on the piece, because I thought her work was really beautiful and she used the theater in a smart way.
Totally. Ben, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So we worked with Mary Birnbaum, who's a wonderful director. She does theater, she does opera, she does all kinds of things. And she worked with us, Alex, in an early workshop too,
right.
When it was kind of, singers and a piano and just the music in their hands. No staging really much at all. And she already was starting to find the physicality of the characters and sort of we worked through the intentions and all kinds of, beats in the scenes that we were developing. And then we got into your beautiful space, which is, a black box of wonders. And Mary, of course, if you're a theater director, you probably love a black box because you know that you have that flexibility to use the space however you can sort of think up. And we worked with your space and Mary. In opera, there's typically a compressed rehearsal period, right? You are bringing in-demand musicians together for that special time where you can actually work it in this beautiful space. And she found these very elegant ways to express the story that we had, in the score and in the libretto, through the black box that you have there, which is fantastic. I'm feeling all this nostalgia for the Y now.
Yeah, it was so great to be in person with so many people. I really miss it.
Yeah,
it was lovely. Now tell us just a little bit about the plot. And we're going to show a segment, and maybe you can set it up a little bit. What are we about to see?
Sure. So the opera is about Theodor Hertzel, who, as you may know, is this very well-known historical political figure. And the opera kind of tells the story of the last year of his life and of some of the highlights politically of his work with political Zionism. And it interweaves with this political, kind of historical, very public narrative, this very private, intimate narrative about his relationship with his wife, Julie Hertzel. And they had a very troubled relationship, and his political work took a real toll on their marriage. And so those are the kind of two stories that are playing out kind of back and forth in this opera, the public and the private, the kind of the personal and the historical. So Ben, do you want to set up this first excerpt?
So in this first excerpt, it's fairly early in Act 1, and we see this argument between Theodor and Julie about the kind of life that they want to live together. And you start to see this very dramatic tension of them having a very different idea of what they want to happen in their lives. So Julie is now going to sing about the life that she thought she had when she came into this marriage.
Oh, you're in for a treat. This is a beautiful piece. This is a beautiful aria. I look forward to seeing it again.
Here we go.
Was
Beautiful. So that was Kristen Gornstein and Mario Diaz-Maresco. Kristen doing a really amazing, beautiful job as Julie Hertzel, and Mario doing some acting there as Theodor.
I just to toot your horn, Alex. You wrote this aria. You based it on a Viennese waltz. You drew inspiration from that music, but it's this waltz that she never gets to. That is always a little bit out of reach, and I always just find that so moving to hear in this aria. And we see that the tension between the two of them, which we were hoping the audience could see and appreciate that. Who's right, who's wrong in that relationship? Like in so many relationships, they're just two human beings struggling to figure their way through things.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going for, and trying to capture the beautifully evocative text which you've written, Ben, which really captures the life that the dreams that she had, the life that she wanted to live, and but she can't have it, and so the music kind of struggles. It wants to waltz, but it can't quite waltz, and there are these moments where she almost settles into it, but it's kind of always out of reach. And there's this sense that his work is really keeping them from living that life that had been their shared dream before, and that's one of the real dramas of the opera.
Yeah. So should we set up the next clip?
Sure. Yeah.
If it has more questions for us, or we'll keep going.
Yeah, let's keep going. Yeah. So this next clip is we just saw kind of the interrelationship, this dynamic between Julie and Theodor, which is really private, which is really not a part of this kind of historical narrative of Theodor Hertzel, the kind of the man, the myth. And now we're going to that historical narrative that plays a big part of the opera, that's interwoven with this personal story. And we have a scene where he gives his address to the Sixth Zionist Congress. And what I really love about what Ben did here with the libretto is that he actually took the real speeches that Theodor Hertzel gave at the Sixth Zionist Congress, but he spoke a lot for hours and different speeches over the course of a few days, and he kind of compressed them into one few minute long speech. And so that's what we have in this scene here. This is kind of like the compressed version of the speech that Theodor Hertzel gives at the Sixth Zionist Congress. And he says some unexpected things in it. So I'll let you hear it and see what you think.
And just to say quickly before we play it, for those who don't know the history, Hertzel at this point, he is just exhausted. He is someone who has been trying to unite the Jewish people, and they're not making it easy for him, and he's sort of at his wit's end. He's trying to find some kind of solution. So there were different options that were discussed for what they could possibly do. In this aria, he's going to kind of dramatically set up the situation, and then people will see what he says.
efforts, the British Crown has offered us a chance to form a new society in East Africa, Uganda. But do not worry, we won't forget Jerusalem. Im Eschkachech Jerusalem, Tishkach Yemini. Im Eschkachech Jerusalem, Tishkach Yemini.
So he says there, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yamini. If I forget Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, which is something he really said. It's political theater at its best. It's a quote from the famous psalm by the rivers of Babylon.
Yeah.
And it really happened. So it's a wild moment. But one of the things that that this scene brings up is how, I think we often think of Theodor Hertzel, especially if we don't know the whole story very well. We think of Theodor Hertzel as this kind of founding father of the state of Israel. And when we were actually working on the opera, some people I'm writing an opera about Theodor Hertzel, and some people responded, "Oh yeah, I know Theodor Hertzel. He's the first president of Israel, right?" And well, no, not exactly. And this scene is a great kind of reminder that actually when he was working, and he died shortly after this, this was his last Zionist Congress, the reality of a Jewish state, of a state of Israel, was really long in the future. And it was very uncertain, such that the idea of moving to Uganda was really on the table as a serious potential option.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this throughout the process, that we were excited by this world that was far away from the world we currently live in, or even have recently been in. It's not just pre-World War II and pre-Holocaust, it's pre-World War I. So it's a completely different political, social, economic, psychological reality. And that's what I think, it's really fun to dive into these characters. And as you're saying, there are historical details that I think we both got very interested in because they were lesser known and people maybe had forgotten about them. And there was this idea that we would try to bring some of that life into those historical, faded photographs, and really get into the psychology of the characters.
Yeah, and I think that really gets to the next scene that we're going to show, which is a flashback that happens at the beginning of the second act. After this scene that we just saw closes the first act. And in the beginning of the second act, we have this flashback to their honeymoon in Paris. And it's this totally different world that really kind of helps to help us understand where they were coming from and how much of a journey they really had been on in a very short period of time. So I think, as Ben says, kind of like bringing color back to these faded black and white pictures and trying to really understand these people not just as historical, from a history book, but actually emotionally and as humans. And one other quick note that I wanted to just say to help understand this is that we did this. This was a kind of preview, semi-staged production. So you'll notice that people are on book; they're reading from sheet music. But as David said earlier, we're wonderful director Mary Birnbaum. Chrissy did amazing lighting. And we did wonderful sets and costumes and stuff. So we really kind of brought it to life as much as we could. But this is a kind of preview of a full production to come.
Yeah. Great. Let's watch it.
Can you see the pavilion?
In the distance, so ugly.
Ugly. Look at this new structure of modern innovation. So elegant, refined, engineered to perfection. Can't you see the beauty?
It's ugly. No color, no light. Dark metal in an empty sky.
This great tower of mankind's innovation.
Theodor, please, can we slow down? It's our honeymoon, not a banquet.
I'm calm, but Eiffel's tower is...
You build your Tower of Babel, and can't touch nature's beauty. Ocean swallows small. We are small. We are small. I see the
painted?
Yes,
What is that?
this new fashion of chic education. It's called nail polish. Don't you like it?
What is the reason for it?
Reason, it's pretty, it's new.
Oh,
I expect to set some trends. I hope you can keep on.
Vienna is a provincial town compared to this great city.
Theodor!
What? It's true.
That's not like you. Our city is not provincial. Take back your words.
One day when we have children, we can move to Paris with them.
We will have such lavish parties. The talk of all Vienna.
What the heart can hold to ponder, what the spirit shape to sing.
Goethe,
Yes,
I prefer Schiller.
but
Not with that. Let's see the gardens.
what are you doing?
Calling a carriage.
The gardens are not far away. We can walk.
I suppose it will be nice to walk these streets. Oh, Theodore, I still love my ring.
I'm glad. After you.
Paris in the summer is so
We've seen that scene so many times, Alex, and I get a little choked up from listening to Kristen and Mario. They're such beautiful singers.
Absolutely. One of the things I really like about that scene is how the storytelling of it really shows us that they have these deeper problems in their relationships and these differences in their personalities that run deeper than the politics and the kind of political journey that he was on. It wasn't just that they departed on that way. They were kind of the seeds of real differences in their personality from the beginning.
Yeah, I have to say, watching, I always felt for them, and watching them now in this, time of quarantine pandemic, I'm identifying in a different way. I'm identifying in all that confusion and all that wonder that, that we're trying to capture in the music and the words, that they are just these human beings. They're seeing all of these things happen. They're seeing the world change. Some of it is exciting. Some of it is terrifying. Some of it is very painful. She's confused by phonographs. We're confused by Zoom meetings, So
Yeah.
Hopefully people maybe identify with that as well, that, the human experience, there's this continuity of people are just feeling what they feel and experiencing what they experience in any given moment.
It's really interesting to think about the sense of wonder of being at that World's Fair, and the newness, the fact that something like nail polish could be new, or the phonograph, or it's just a wonderful kind of textured historical detail, which kind of really brings us back and sets the mood for that.
So we have one more clip.
Yeah. So now we're going back to the kind of historical world for the end. But in a way, this is actually, the two big strands of the opera how is this history going to resolve itself? Where is the Zionist movement going to leave off? Herzl's life work, where's that going to leave off when he dies? Where we've left him so far, it's pretty uncertain. The Sixth Zionist Congress ended in turmoil. This idea of Uganda was very divisive. And then we see in the second act, he goes to the Pope and he petitions the Pope to try to get the Pope's support for going to Palestine. And he is unable to get that support. So there's a lot of uncertainty. So that's one of the threads that we're waiting to see. How is this going to end during his lifetime? And he does die tragically young. And the other thread that we're waiting to see, how is this going to resolve, is his relationship with Julie, right? Because as we saw in the first excerpt we showed, this trajectory of his political life really took him away from this, what we were seeing in this honeymoon, where even they have these differences, they kind of are both reveling in the wonder of the new technology and of just enjoying life together. And his political work takes him away from that. And so the other big question at the end of the opera is how is that going to be resolved? And in fact, right before the part we're about to show, he's on his deathbed and he asks Julie, he says, please, make sure that my work is remembered and kind of, follow it up in a positive way, something along those lines. And then he dies. And then we see what we are about to see, which is the very end of the opera. And do you have anything to add to that?
Can I ask you a question, Alex?
Sure, yeah.
There are these dark, foreboding, low notes throughout the opera. Can you talk maybe a little? Was there a musical inspiration for some of that texture? And how did you think about it structurally?
Well, there are these big low notes, these big low C's that actually start the opera. And there's this scene with Dreyfus, the Dreyfus Affair. The Dreyfus Affair was it was an anti-Semitic. Ben, you want to explain what the Dreyfus Affair was?
Sure. So Alfred Dreyfus was a French army captain. He was Jewish. And he was falsely accused of committing treason against France, and there was a whole scandalous trial. And for a long time, everyone thought he was guilty, and then people started to come around to, maybe he's being unjustly, wrongly accused. And he was sentenced, and he was sent to this island to live out his sentence. And he eventually is exonerated and brought back and freed. But it goes on for years, and it's this huge scandal that rocks Europe. And Hertzel was actually there covering the Dreyfus Affair as a reporter for this major newspaper in Europe. And he witnesses this, and actually in his earliest journals, he even thought, maybe this guy is guilty. And then he kind of starts to figure out, wait, I think he's being wrongly accused here. And he realizes it's anti-Semitism. So that is one contributing factor, in the historiography that contributes to him getting more politically involved in the way he did. And we use it as the opening of the opera to sort of as a prelude to as a prologue to the whole arc of his story. The opera itself, right. I think we started to mention, focuses on the last year of his life when things are kind of falling apart and he's trying to assemble these political activities, and he's really struggling to do so. Right. So to contrast with that end of his life, the beginning of his political trajectory. Right.
So the Dreyfus Affair is really kind of a watershed moment, and different historians disagree. Is it the impetus, or is it an impetus? But no one, everyone agrees that this is an important moment for Hertzel, and it's an important moment for the history of anti-Semitism, modern anti-Semitism. And so we start the opera off with the Dreyfus Affair as a way of kind of contextualizing, this journey that Hertzel is going on, and that his politics are going on. And so it starts off with these low C notes, which are very kind of foreboding and, capture some of the uncertainty or of the danger of the division. It's hard to put into words. I think that's why I like writing music, because you can't really capture it exactly. But these kind of low foreboding notes in different forms come back. And there's various kind of musical motives throughout that are bringing these emotions to life in different ways. And the opera also ends with these low C notes, which I think asks, it doesn't have an exact meaning that I could put into words, but it kind of asks some kind of question of the listener and the viewer, how much has changed? Where have we, well, on this journey that we've been on, as this story has happened and as Hertzel did the work that he did, how much has changed and how much stays the same? And I think that's really, the big question that we're left with as we contemplate the legacy of Hertzel. And we do so with the benefit of hindsight in many different respects, which, don't really line up against each other so cleanly. On the one hand, we have the benefit of knowing that the Holocaust happened and that, this kind of anti-Semitism, the writing on the wall that Hertzel was seeing turned out to be, very prescient in many ways. And then on the other hand, we also have the hindsight of knowing that the state of Israel does exist now. And we also have the hindsight of knowing that the tsuris, the pains, the problems of the Jewish people, unfortunately, have not ended still. And so we're kind of left with all of these things to wonder. And, we're just kind of grappling with them in the opera. So sure, let's listen to the end.
Let's listen.
Secret
David, you're back.
Yes. Again, I'm David Sollings, Director of Arts and Culture at the 14th Street Y. And we've been listening and watching State of the Jews. And we have composer Alex Weiser, who is also a LABA alumni. And we have librettist Ben Kaplan, two extremely talented and young people who created a gem. And it's been beautiful watching it again, listening to this stunning music, and hearing you talk about it, especially when you were talking about the Viennese waltz and how that was the waltz that Julie never got to actually live or experience or dance. That was really beautiful to hear you articulate that. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more just about this final piece that we just saw and that last moment and what that means for you.
Yeah, well, maybe, Ben, for those that don't know Hebrew, do you want to kind of give a quick gloss of the text there?
Yeah, it's basically, so Oseh Shalom, is a very well-known prayer. May peace be upon us. We sing it at many different times of the year, when we are longing for peace in the world and for peace within ourselves. So the idea there was, actually, I wrote the text originally, I'm going to confess this, I wrote the text originally in English, and Alex came to me and said, what if it's in Hebrew? And I said, Alex, that's crazy. But then he convinced me of it, and once we kind of went in that direction, realized this is a chance to do that opera thing that opera can do, or at least try to do it, of that expansiveness, that sense of abstraction, the mythic, the large historical expanse that you can try to capture. So much of the piece, we really wanted to get into the nitty gritty of the historical details. And here we kind of said, what if we just try to explode out a bit and capture this whole expansive history? And so, there are many different meanings, but the rest of the text is Oseh Shalom, so it's talking about Jerusalem being the city of peace, but under these very unresolved chords that Alex has put down, and may they rest in peace, and it uses that kind of language. So that was fun to play with, to try to capture this level of Hebrew that is sort of timeless and literary and could go in a contemporary direction, but also is ancient, also, and kind of mix these things together to capture that timelessness.
Yeah, the thing that I really like about it is the way you can kind of have multiple readings. It's this kind of funeral dirge, but is it a funeral dirge for Theodor Hertzel in the modern state of Israel when he's being reinterred because his body was reburied in Israel? Or is it a funeral dirge for our contemporary moment? Or is it a funeral dirge that's happening somewhere in ancient Israel and is kind of hearkening back to the Israel that the Eretz Israel that is being imagined by Zionists in that time in 1903 and 1904. It's kind of a bit of all of those things. And as Ben said, we kind of step back away from the literal. So much of the opera is about capturing the fine-tuned historical details and making sure to get the story just right. It was very gratifying to also step back and just have this real emotional, capturing of the sense of loss of Herzl's death and all of the kind of conflicting and unresolved emotions that this story leaves us with. Oh, David, I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It was also there for me in the lyrics just about how Julie is going to tell his story to their children and how she's going to keep him alive, even though their relationship was not an easy one, I think, for either of them. And that sort of micro has the macro that we see in that final moment. And I totally got all of those layers that you were discussing through the music, through the work, and through the performance. So congratulations.
Thank you.
It really hits home. What's next for this, guys? Because it really deserves to be seen more. And I know that we at the 14th Street Y would love to advocate. So let us know what we can do. How can we help you out?
Well, thank you, David. You know, as they say in Yiddish, "Von dein Moil in Gottes Euren," from your mouth to God's ears. It should be heard on bigger stages. And again, yeah, you know, we have some wonderful opera companies that we've been talking to are really interested in doing it. And then of course, the pandemic has descended upon us. So we're not really sure exactly what the next step is at this particular moment. But we're hoping to bring this to an opera company to do a full production off book, you know, with even more lavish costumes and sets and so on. And hopefully that will be in the not too distant future.
Thank you, Alex and Ben, for being part of our community,
Thank
and
you
we're
so
so
much.
glad that you shared this.
Thank
you
you.
so
Next
much.
year together in person for the Tikkun.
Next year in person. All right. Well, thanks, guys, and we look forward to seeing you in our web Zoom sessions. Bye.